Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie noob nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink was provided by the wonderful and fabulous Mysterious Benefactor, who actually, I think, sent me 2 full vials of it. And I'm glad, because I'm not sure I would have tried it on my own, and as it turns out, I actually quite like it. Now, it's by Waterman, and this is their blue-black ink, but of course Waterman has all these weird names for their inks, so this one is actually called Mysterious Blue. As you can see, not a lot of black in this blue-black. If anything, there's some green. Yeah, but as you can see, it's very blue, but as it dries, it turns more green. Now, this is one of the inks that you guys voted that you wanted me to review before I left, so let's get started. Let's check out the chromatography, which, as you can see, definitely has some green in it. But also, here's how you're supposed to do the chromatography, if my camera will ever focus on what I want it to. Any day now. Sorry. You can kind of see where the initial drop was put, but still fairly faint. Up through this light blue, a little bit of green, then sort of like a foresty green, and then a bright green, and then a bright blue. Now, here's after I let it dry. You can see there's not a whole lot of difference. The bottom dot got a bit darker. There's less of the forest green, just the bright green and the very bright blue. Now, all the tests were done in these 2 pens. This is an Esterbrook S.J, so it's their smallest of the 3 Esterbrooks. And it has, again, if my camera will ever focus, a 2668 nib, which is a fine nib. In fact, I remember seeing on one of the old advertisements that it's like good for, shorthand. It's like a fine nib with very consistent flow. It certainly is, and also if you'll see, that goes on very blue, but as it dries, it'll get more green. Obviously, it's still in there. And it was also in this JinHao 250. This crazy pattern, I kind of like it. Now, these pens actually have a number 5 nib instead of a number 6, like many of the other JinHaos. And again, but because this push-on cap doesn't seal quite as well, the ink does tend to condense. So as you can see, it's a bit darker. And actually, I really like this ink condensed. Like when it's slightly darker, I don't know, I just enjoy it more. But yeah, again, it goes on very blue, will dry more green. So I thought I'd compare the blue blacks from a lot of the major brands. So here's Mysterious Blue up the top. You can definitely see that green in there. Mont Blanc's Midnight Blue, which has some gray and almost like a goldy kind of thing going on. It's very strange. Parker's Quink Blue Black, which might just be the bluest of all of these, and I really don't see any black in there. And again, there's just a tiny bit of greenishness. And then Schaefer's Script Blue Black, which I think I have in a pen. Hang on. Now, this is kind of curious, just like the, see, it goes on much more blue, but then when it very quickly dries and turns more gray. So, I don't know, maybe that's the thing about blue blacks. But again, there's definitely like something goldish in there. But yeah. Also, I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but not a lot of saturation in any of these. The major brands don't seem to like saturation in their blue blacks. Anyways, moving on. Top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. I'll try and hold this real still so you can get a good look at it. Yeah, it's definitely not the darkest blue black I've ever seen, but, and I hope this will come through on camera, but there's actually a teeny tiny bit of sheen in a few parts. It's a reddish black sheen through there. It's not coming through, of course, because it's my lucky day. But yeah, there's some nice shading. There's definitely some green in here. Yeah. So the 2668 nib, which is a fine, took 5.5 seconds to dry. The medium JinHao 250 took 9. You can almost see where it wants to halo and sheen through there. It's very well behaved. There's no bleed, no feather, no spread. There's no echo at all because this is very dense paper and this isn't the darkest ink, but very well behaved. I actually ended up enjoying this ink a lot more than I thought. However, there's not a lot of water resistance. You can see a bit of where it originally was, but it's very faint. Would not be the easiest to recover. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where again, especially in the wettest parts, you can definitely pick up that greenishness to it. Still some lovely shading. The fine nib took 5.5 seconds to dry. The medium JinHao took 9, so exact same results. Here you can definitely see more of that halo, and here you can also see a bit more of that red sheen, if only it would show up on camera. But yeah, very interesting. As I say here, nowhere near a blue-black. It was very well behaved so far. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. Halo in the wettest parts. But again, not a lot of water resistance. Again, the JinHao, since it puts down a bit more ink, a bit more remains, but definitely not easy to recover. Next is Tomoe River Paper, where I said that it looks more blue on here, but now I'm looking at it, I mean in the general writing it seems to stay more blue. But yeah, the fine nib took 6 seconds to dry, the medium JinHao took 11. Here you can finally see some of that sheen. Sort of a red sheen. Definitely halos on this paper. You definitely see shading on here. It's very pleasant. Not the darkest ink, but still. There is some echo potential, just because this is such thin paper. But as you can see, when you lift it off the table, there isn't even the barest hint of it showing through. There is no bleed. There's no show through. It's very well behaved in that regard. There is no spread. There's no feathering. It's all good here. But, yeah, no, that's totally gone. In fact, the camera is picking up more than the naked eye can. So it's really, really gone. But Tomoe River loves to let ink slide away when you add more water. So I feel like that's kind of a result we could have anticipated. Here's 20-pound copier paper, where I just used the 266 in the Esterbrook, except to write the name. But as you can see, neither of them really bled through. You see these little dots of like near show through, but really not much else. In that regard, very, very well behaved. I liked this pairing. 1.5 seconds to dry. But there is a good bit of spread. I'm going to try and show you the difference here. You see the Esterbrook, and you see that? It's the same pen, but there's definitely some broadening of the line. You still get a touch of that greeniness coming through. It's very woolly. It takes on a very woolly effect, but I mean, that's as close as it gets to feathering, just sort of like a very intense woolliness. But yeah, because this paper is much more absorbent, it's harder to wash all of it off. And actually what's interesting is I feel like here you can see a bit of what we saw in the chromatography, where like that dark blue remains, but that green is trying to wash off. I thought that was kind of cool. So yeah. Next up is Mead Notebook Paper, where again I just used the 266 except to write the name. And there you can see that it was slightly more leaning towards bleed. Of course, this is the edge of the page, and that's a problem that Mead has. But still, there's essentially no bleed, and this is still very cheap paper. And although it's a fine nib, I would say that this ink is slightly wet. I'd say it's maybe a 5.5 or a 6 out of 10. No, I'd say 5.5. So it's just slightly wet. So yeah, 2.5 seconds to dry. I said it could have been a lot worse. There is some spread. This is a slightly broadened line. However, there is a bit of woolliness, but that's about as close as it gets to feathering. You don't see real feathering, just sort of that woolliness. And again, in the water test, there's that dark blue, or darker-ish, I don't know, blue at the center, and then you see some of that green popping off. But yeah, if you absolutely had to, you could recover that. Now, lastly is Modern Accurate Moleskine Notebook Paper, where again, I just used the 266 except to write the name. But yeah, again, of course, the medium nib was more prone to bleed through. I mean, look at that. There's really no bleed on here. It impressed me. You see these like very near show through in just a tiny few places. So that definitely wowed me. You still get a bit of shading. However, there is a problem. I'm going to try and bring this in real close and hold it still. Do you see that? See those big feathers shooting off there? It's kind of distracting. And again, in the wettest parts is where it starts to sort of lean towards a greenish color. 5 seconds to dry, which kind of surprised me because this is more absorbent paper. I said there's no shading, but there's halos, and I ended up changing my mind. It actually shades more than it halos. There's no sheen. But yeah, there is some pretty intense feathering. But again, the water test, this paper really doesn't like water. Most of it washed away. It did kind of feather and explode a bit, so I don't know. But yeah, so there you go. There's Waterman's version of blue-black, also known as mysterious blue. It has a lot of green in it, not a lot of black to this blue-black, but it really surprised me. I'm really glad that I was given a sample, because otherwise I wouldn't have tried it. My cat's really angry. I highly recommend you try some for yourself. It's very unique, and it's pretty well behaved. So, for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.